Clay, since you usually notice things like new badges and different costumes and different tailoring on the suits and everything in this Star Trek series, I was wondering if you noticed that evil Bob Picardo in this episode called Darkling was wearing prosthetic teeth.
I didn't notice the teeth. I noticed the eyes, though.
Oh, okay. That was the other thing. Yeah, so we don't notice Betazoid eyes, but we notice the Doctor's eyes. I didn't notice either, I don't think. So this goes to speak to the difference between us.
Bob Picardo just has such dreamy eyes.
Yeah,
it's tough not to look at.
Falling into them endlessly every single episode. Yeah, apparently there were small irises, I guess, to make his eyes look beady or something like that. That's what the way that it's described. But I couldn't tell you. I wasn't aware. I didn't notice the teeth either. I noticed his hair got frizzier. Like they sort of picked out his hair a little bit to make it a little bit fluffy. But that's the extent of the physical differences that I noticed.
I almost didn't notice what I have to assume is the laziest alien makeup in the history of this franchise. Which was
we've got some contenders here. Is if the of these aliens we meet in this episode?
Yeah, it's like lazy Bajoran.
Yeah,
I guess is the best way I could put it.
They're a spin-off of the Bajorans. They look very similar to them.
Yeah, at least the Bajorans get like
earrings,
an earring, and an ethos. You know?
Yeah. I was wondering. I mean, maybe this is better for a discussion in the actual podcast. Is Zahir in this episode the guy that Kes falls for? Is this the most prominent amount of screen time for a guest actor that could easily not exist and not change anything in the episode?
I think that should be a question for literally everybody in this episode.
Okay.
I don't think anybody. I think no one in this episode needs
to be there.
Needs to be here.
This is Darkling.
The story literally would not change if you took anybody or everybody out of it.
Our attention would not change either. This is Darkling Duck, my favorite animated show from the after-school era. Episode 18, by God, we'll get to the end of this season soon, of the third season of Star Trek Voyager. Came out on February 19th, 1997. Did this come out before or after Virtuosity, Clay? The sci-fi classic. Do you know? I had to look it up because I was so curious.
You know, when I was younger, I had all the stats on Virtuosity just hardwired in my head.
I can't believe we haven't covered it on the Patreon because I love Virtuosity. I haven't seen it in 10 years, but I love it.
That is the weird thing that I didn't know about you, but it has come up a number of times, is your love of the movie Virtuosity.
It's one of Russell Crowe's top 3 performances, and it's like a terrible script for him, but he completely dominates that movie as Sid 3.67 or whatever that thing is called.
He's very good at that. That seems to be what he does. Because anything he's been in the last 5 years, it's been more of this kind of the same thing where it's like, this isn't great, but he's really good.
Well, Virtuosity is his first feature, right? His first Hollywood feature?
Is it after Romper Stomp? Is it Romper Stomper, the big Australian one he was in?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking. I think it is. I think it was that one, but the Australian thing is, I guess, the difference. Like, this is his first Hollywood production, I think.
Off to a good start. It's Denzel Washington too, right?
Yes, Denzel Washington. It's a good cat. The movie's premise is actually pretty good too. It's just he gives such a schlocky B sci-fi movie performance. It's like incredible to watch. We'll have to cover it for the Patreon.
Denzel's one of those actors where if you go back and you actually look at his filmography, there is a lot of weird shit in between the stuff that he's known for. It's not just like he appears on the scene and then it's Devil in a Blue Dress, Malcolm X, and Philadelphia.
No,
it's like there's Virtuosity. There's a movie he did. I've seen this movie and I don't remember why I watched it, where he plays a lawyer who gets murdered, and Bob Hoskins is the racist white cop that needs to solve his murder.
Didn't we cover
that? Is that why? I've seen it?
We covered that on the Patreon, yeah. Or it's because
it was his lowest. Yeah, it was his. That's why I've seen that movie.
It was on Real Ripe and Real Rotten.
Oh man, back when we used to do that 10 years ago, I was racking my brain trying to figure out why I had seen that movie.
That was a terrible movie. Yeah, that was his lowest rated. Yep.
Yeah, it's a doozy. So there's a lot of those in there too. And then he teams up with Tony Scott and starts wearing the same shirt in every movie.
Right, giant pants and a giant shirt.
Yeah.
And then he did Signs. Not Signs. Is it Signs? Fences. That's it.
I wish he was in Signs.
This is Darkling. Anyway, did this come up before or after Virtuosity? I ask because the Doctor's problem is very similar to the concept of Sid 6.7 in Virtuosity.
Oh, is it really? I'm going to say after.
This did come out after, yes, which leads me to think that it was obviously influenced by Virtuosity.
Yeah. Well, colossal hit, Virtuosity, really influenced the culture as a whole. Just
so I can complete the thought, or if people aren't left wondering, in Virtuosity, Russell Crowe plays this computer AI villain that is like an amalgamation of all these different serial killers and like horrible criminals that have been caught in the past, and the police have put their minds into this virtual reality training simulator, and they've combined them into this character called Sid 6.7, which is played by Russell Crowe. But it's the same idea. He's like the worst parts of everybody. Anyway, Darkling. Teleplay goes to Joe Menosky. Story credit goes to Brandon Braga and Joe Menosky. Directed by Alex Singer. And Universe date, 50693.2, which is 2373. We've been in that year for a while. Darkling. The Doctor alters his personality subroutines while Kes contemplates leaving Voyager for a man. Good. So I was all over the map with this one, I think.
Yeah.
I've sat and reflected on this one for a lot, but which is weird because when it started, the first 15 minutes, I was like, this is not any kind of Voyager episode that I want to watch, really. Like this looks terrible. I don't want to deal with a Kes falls for a man that she met off screen in between the last couple episodes, and she leaves the ship. And then the Doctor went crazy, and I was like, okay, at least I have something to cling on to here. We're going to do the Voyager thing of a character episode is usurped by the sci-fi concept, and we just deal with the sci-fi concept for another 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then it ended, and then I thought about it, and I was like, that could have been something. So I'm in this weird place where it's not a good episode. It's pretty bad, but I actually think that, and I looked up the behind the scenes stuff because I was fairly sure I had an idea of what had happened, and I seem to be correct about that. But I thought this could have been an interesting episode, but instead it just turned into this limp fare thing that we had to deal with and watch.
Yeah, I kind of went through the same roller coaster ride. The thing that's getting me this season, and I don't know if it's just the one thing that's giving me a ray of hope or something, but I keep thinking every episode is going to be the last Kes episode.
Okay.
And because I know she leaves, and I don't know when it happens, and they keep teasing this, and I keep falling for it.
Okay.
And so this one I was thinking, this makes sense. Why? I think her reasoning for wanting to go is very sound. I think her reasoning for staying is very stupid.
Yeah.
Also, what is her lifespan again?
9 years, something like
9 years. Yeah. Okay. For some reason, I thought it was 3 years, and so when she said she was 3, I was like, Jesus, she's better hurry up.
No, they lined it up to, like, this is a typical Voyager thing, right? They lined it up that her lifespan would match the anticipated run of the show, which is 7 years for a Star Trek show.
So they could kill her in the last episode.
So that but at least that's an interesting idea, right? This character's entire life will take place on this show as Voyager makes its way back to Earth.
Oh yeah, no, it's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
If you have the character in a situation where those 9 years would be at any point more interesting than just watching her file paperwork on a ship.
Yeah.
And to the point where she even realizes this herself within the universe of the show.
Yes.
But cannot take the step to actually realize the potential of her short life. I thought that idea was interesting. I was actually into it. All right. I was into
the Kes part.
I was into the early Kes part only because it's they've literally done nothing with her as far as this element of like it's much like the entire concept of the show.
Yeah.
Her short lifespan is something that they kind of forget about and don't really deal with ever.
Well, it's the same way Voyager does with a lot of things. It's kind of a fact that exists, but it's not particularly important to the show unless it needs to be important for some reason. So it's like how Voyager is stranded far from home is brought up occasionally, and it's sometimes the focus of something, but they don't always treat the show as if that's the situation that they find themselves in.
Right. And, you have this character who has this thing built into them that should be something that generates a certain emotion from them.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. I mean, the only time that it's ever really generated anything was when she broke up with Neelix because she realized that was fucking dumb.
Right.
Can't waste. She's wasted almost a third of her life with this guy.
Quarter of her life with this horrible Neelix clown person.
And so, like, this idea that she is actually going to explore life outside of Voyager, I'm like, okay, I'm down with that. Again, in the back of my head, I'm like, maybe this is the one where she actually leaves.
Yeah.
I was into the Doctor stuff at first. Mainly because it allowed Robert Picardo to channel some Eddie the Werewolf energy from The Howling.
Yes,
which is fun.
Yep.
Picardo's a great actor. I anytime they give him more to do, I'm always happy to see it. But very quickly, I was like, okay, this is pretty stupid. And especially at the point when Balan is like, listen, this is just going to wear off in like 10 hours.
Just let it go.
Yeah, it just got really stupid really fast. And like, there was a part of me that was like, okay, there's something interesting in here where the Doctor, who is this artificial intelligence program, who is made up of basically he's a computer program, but we know that he is capable of some human emotion because he has professed his feelings for Kes in the past, right?
Yep.
And so there is something kind of interesting about this idea that he is trying to tweak himself with the Lord Byron
with Gandhi.
Apparently Gandhi, an incredible prude. I didn't know that about Gandhi. But.
Gandhi, yeah. The Lord Byron was the weird one. I had just read a book that features a relative of Lord Byron, which is like just kind of bizarre that this is all coming together. Like, how many times do you
Mark Byron?
How many times do you have the name Lord Byron dropped in your lap in the course of a couple months? And this time it's happened twice. But yeah, I take your point too. And I honestly, I don't understand the historical background of those characters enough to know whether or not I'm being bullshitted by the show.
Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah. But, like, there's something interesting about he's trying to tweak his personality, and it's sort of the same thing that comes along anytime they try to do this with Data. But I always find it interesting where he has now one of the side effects of trying to become more human and forcing yourself, like, artificially becoming more human is not being aware of the negative side of human emotion. And so he adds something to his program that allows him to get, like, insanely jealous. So, like, that's pretty interesting, but that isn't even really why he's doing this. He's just, I don't know, he gives some speech about being the darkness of humanity or some bullshit. But I kind of, if the whole thing had been sort of, how the Doctor is jealous, like Lifetime movie boyfriend jealous.
Yeah.
How do we get him to that point? What does he learn from this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Like, that's kind of interesting to me, but they didn't do that at all. Like, they kind of hinted at it, but they just turned it into this other bullshit. And then at the end, he just goes back to normal, and they're like, you're fine now. Yeah. Well, that was a close one. Nothing happened.
I'm glad you didn't rape anybody here.
And also, why is Voyager investigating this guy falling off a rock?
I don't know.
They're not cops.
have a few. Well, I mean, it was such an incredibly dramatic fall sequence that I think that they were obligated contractually to have to investigate whenever someone falls in slow motion.
Even if they think it's the guy. It was incredibly dramatic. They think it's the guy who is bullshitting Janeway. It's like, okay, yes, well, that's a local problem. That's not the fucking Federation's issue.
My plot question to you is like, I agree that I don't really understand why they have to investigate this other than that's just what they decide to do. What was the point of the second guy? The one that Janeway is talking to who then gets attacked and why does he exist in this story?
I think it's solely to be a red herring.
For who? Just the Voyager crew?
For the audience. Like I think it's and by proxy the Voyager crew, yeah.
But isn't the Doctor revealed to be the one immediately after the scene?
Very quickly, yes. Yeah. It's like the next scene, yeah.
But I guess my question is that they go back to that guy because he gets his hand burned, right? And then he's like scared of talking, and I didn't understand his point at all. I thought that was such a strange, weird, useless addition to the script. But.
Yeah, it's there to facilitate the setup of him getting knocked off the rock because, they obviously have an issue with each other.
Right.
And then you don't see who pushes him off the rock. So obviously the audience is supposed to assume it's this guy.
Yeah.
But yes, they show it's the Doctor in the very next scene.
Right.
And so you get into that problem in a mystery when the audience has more information than the detective does.
Yeah, yeah.
Where you're just kind of waiting around, being like, "Yeah, it's not fucking him." Like,
right.
It's
put two and two together. Right.
Yeah. It's and it's not compelling enough. It's not a Columbo episode where that's the gimmick of the show is the audience has more information than Columbo does.
Right. Right. Yeah, I was.
Then they're just stuck with this guy. That they got to do stuff with.
Right. He's got to be continuing on in the episode. I was struck by, so what I was thinking as this was going on, right, was that I was watching these scenes and they have the Kes sequence where they're building this character story for Kes where she's getting anxious to leave and stuff. They're having a couple scenes of, I thought, pretty interesting perspective on this. Like, so granted, you have to start at ground zero with everything here. They have not done Kes, the character, right on this show to make this kind of story work for her.
Right.
But I see how this could work in a better run show and a better written show. And I think that there's real potential in dotting your series with Kes grows up stories where you can have a different perspective as she ages along with the show. And I like this one, this idea of she's now sort of out of her teenage years or like her, in her early 20s, and she's thinking about going out into the world. And I thought that I thought the writing was pretty good. Like she obviously sets up the jealousy thing with the Doctor. They have their scene where he's like, "Oh, who's this the here character?" and all that stuff to establish that he knows who he is. Then she has a conversation with like Tuvok and Janeway that were, I thought, kind of neat little allegories about, the young girl who's growing up and trying to spread her wings, and there's this sort of like paternalistic defensiveness of her leaving from Tuvok, who's like, listen, I don't think you're ready for this, and Janeway, who's the maternal figure, who's like, spread your wings and you should go out there and experience all that life has to give you. And I'm like, this is okay. And then when the Doctor started going crazy, right, there was this very sexual angle to everything. And I was like, wow, they're gonna play this is that he literally wants to fuck Kes and he's going to kill the people who get in his way from that, right? And so I was like, wow,
as you should.
Right, exactly. That's the only defense is a good offense. so they do that, right? And I'm like, wow, this is getting crazy for a Voyager episode. I wonder how far this is going to go. At that point, there's a finger snap, and he does what you say, which is he just becomes evil incarnate for some reason.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, all right, this failed. So what went wrong? And I was looking at the production notes. So originally, it wasn't even what my idea was that they were going to play this sort of like sexual mind thing, which is that the Doctor has this deep-seated fear of Kes leaving. He loves Kes, and he has this sort of like psychosexual jealousy thing that's going to upset his program or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he's going to react basically like a jilted boyfriend or something. And I was like, okay, this is going to be kind of interesting. That apparently wasn't the original intent, according to Memory Alpha. It was just that Braga and Minosky thought that the psychosexual stuff was kind of like fun to play with at the very beginning, but they never made a connection between it's because he loves Kes. That's why that this is going. So I was like, oh, that's disappointing. And then apparently Michael Piller had them tone down the rest of the script. He thought it was too much for the character. He thought that people wouldn't be able to, as you're saying, like when they end it and the reset button is hit, the audience wouldn't be able to forgive the Doctor if he went any further with it.
Yeah, I mean, if you have everybody's fan favorite character, the Doctor, like rape somebody, I don't think there's any coming back from that.
The interesting thing is that he sort of gets to, like, he stalks that ensign down the hallway, you know?
Right, yeah.
And I like that stuff. Like, so I'm not saying he doesn't necessarily have to actually commit sexual violence, but I thought they did this really cool job of hinting at what he was thinking about.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's I think there is an interesting story in there, and I just don't know why they decided to go the way they did with it.
Yeah.
Because it's not like the
just
the Doctor face. The Doctor turning into the combined evil of every, I guess,
four people.
Philosophical thinker in human history
is T'Pau, Gandhi, and Lord Byron.
Yeah, who knew Socrates was such a monster?
Yeah.
You know, that's like, I don't know what they're trying to do with that. Like they had it, you know, they had the plate was spinning, and then they tried to spin another plate, and both of them just smashed.
It's the Voyager problem, right? Like Voyager can't do a character story at this point in the show. It's like incapable of doing it. And so what I thought was, and I was even set up to be bored. I was like, this looks like a terrible Kes story. She falls for this guy who's clearly turns out to be the wrong guy, and Voyager has to rescue or something. Not the way that the show goes, but what I thought was going to happen. But just to have, for how important the conflict is between the Doctor and Kes here, and it's about Kes leaving, that after the first 15 minutes, that's no longer the point anymore. It's just the Doctor becomes this like mustache twirling villain who kidnaps people and beams them down, you know, to a cliff, and then threatens to throw them off the cliff. It just, they completely abandoned any sense of like, this is the actual cool Kes story. Let's instead focus on this sci-fi story that is kind of bullshit, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and doesn't even really, like, eventually it just abandons whatever the initial concept was. He goes off in a completely different direction about what kind of villain he's supposed to be. And I was disappointed by that. And I thought it ended up just killing the episode, but there was potential, as we've said.
Yeah. And I think the whole episode gets kneecapped by the ending completely, because I think the only way you can do a story like this, I think, is if something fundamentally changes at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if your story is about Kes feeling like she needs to spread her wings and fly, and then the guy who has been friend-zoned by her turns into a fucking monster because he's so jealous that she's going to leave, and then the end of the story is he goes back to normal, everybody says don't worry about it, and Kes says, well, I think I'll stick around.
I'll just stick around.
Like that's that you can't do that. That's the symptom of the television show peeking through the story. Like you have to return things back to zero, and they're telling a story that fundamentally can't have things returned back to zero.
No, and I think that's the core issue with Kes, actually, is that in a better serialized story, the Kes development would be allowed to flourish and change, and she would become a different character across the seasons, but they can't do that. So the only thing they can say is that, hey, this is crazy. She's only 2 years old, you know? And it's like it stops meaning anything at that point because her decisions about growing up, that's why she's such a cool arc, is that you could have incredibly meaningful allegorical situations for Kes that completely change her outlook on the ship and everything, portraying, you know, growing up and getting older from kid to adolescent to teenager to adult and all that stuff. But they're not allowed to have her change at the end of the episode. Right. So it's what you're saying. She has to hit the reset button. she's not allowed to actually leave, as 99% of people do leave in this story. You know, there's no, most people, for the allegory of this, leave the nest. You know, they go somewhere else and they do something, but Kes can't do it.
I think the one thing that they could have done that might have been interesting and would be interesting enough to put at the end of the episode, and something that they could take or leave to ever address ever again, would be if Kes said, you know, I've decided to stay. I realize, you know, the value of being on this ship, blah, 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 blah. And she says that to the doctor or whoever, and then they're like, oh, great, we're really glad to have you here. And then you follow her back to her quarters, and the door shuts, and she breaks down into tears.
Yeah.
You know, like she's clearly made the decision she doesn't want to make, because, you know, because she's not exactly a forceful presence or personality.
No, she's not.
And you know, it would suck. It would be disappointing. But I think there's something there to be like, yeah, she wants to go out into the world, but she feels an obligation, rightly or wrongly, that doesn't allow her to do that, and she's really fucking messed up by it and really depressed about it. I think that's a way you could do it, where it's like, okay, well, we have something here we can mine in the future if we want, but I mean, I don't know, it's. Even there, you're coming away from the episode being like, oh, all of our fan favorite characters are actively making this girl's life a living hell now.
Yeah,
because they can't let her go, and that's not really a great look.
No, it's not. But I think that in a more serious show, Neelix would have performed that function, right? He would have been more actively detrimental to Kes, and his jealousy is what's holding her back in a situation like this, where he's like, you can't leave. What am I supposed to do? You know, it's the abusive boyfriend trope about what's going on, and she feels bad and can't escape from it.
It's really interesting that they choose to do that with the doctor and not Neelix. Like, Neelix is not even really in this at all.
No, he's not.
He's
they
like
confirmed
they
broke up. This is the first time they've confirmed they broke up. Yeah.
He's in the back. I mean, maybe he's just like, you know, being an adult about it. He's like, yeah, you know, whatever. I got these 3 hologram boob ladies taking up all my time now. She can do whatever she wants. Right. But it was very strange that everybody in the cast gets at least like a walk on in this.
Yeah.
Except Neelix, who's just kind of in the background, not even involved in the story of his ex-girlfriend being stalked by the doctor.
Voyager's not a serious show, unfortunately. It's. I'm a little bit surprised by how quickly they have fallen into this trap. You know, I thought that the show would sort of do its own thing for a couple seasons, but they went to this pretty quickly, where they're just they're not going to really stick with the character development in the way that DS9 did or anything. It's much more, obviously, as people say, inspired by TNG than anything else. But its construction and its characters are built for a serialized story. Like, they designed them that way. And when they gave up on that, the characters got severely crippled by it, I think. They can't recover because they don't have anywhere else to go.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate to see. I know we've talked about this a number of times before, but just how this show is, it's just a brand maintenance show, it feels like, where it's like, they're not allowed to do anything really interesting or really push the envelope the way Deep Space Nine did. It's just we need to get we need something that has the Star Trek name on it with costumes people recognize. Maybe we'll bring back the Borg so people get, you know, horny about that. Yeah.
Zach Handlen. Zach Handlen is. I follow him on Patreon. I support him there, and he's going through Enterprise right now, and he's. I feel a sort of kindredness with him because he sort of has our thoughts going through the series in a different way. Like he's even voicing, his latest review was like, starts off with this like, have I just watched too much Star Trek at this point? Yeah. Like, you know, like is there am I even objectively able to say that this is no good? Because he was on that Dean Stockwell Prison Planet episode of Enterprise. And he's like, this is the most generic episode of Star Trek that's possible to put out there. And he's like, have I just seen too much and I can't even be fair? And I feel the same way, but I think it's the same problem of like Enterprise and Voyager feel the same in that way, in that they don't feel like they are trying to do anything other than here is an AI generated Star Trek script that we can put out, and it unfortunately it feels that way a lot of the time.
Well, it's so strange too, because I mean, even Enterprise, it's like, what is it about? I don't know if it's cold feet on the producer's side or something, but what is it about coming up with these legitimately interesting concepts to further the franchise, whether it's Voyager or even Enterprise?
Right. And you're talking about the context of the setting for each of them.
Yeah. You know, Enterprise is like, okay, it's the first Enterprise. There's a lot of interesting things you could do there. And then like they just kind of, it's like they kind of, the concept kind of makes its way to the finished product.
Yeah.
And then by like the third episode, they're like, yeah, we can't, this is too risky. We can't do this. We need to
just run into an alien.
Even ship.
Yeah. Run into an alien and deal with it and get out of there.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that Enterprise wasn't 5 years later or something, you know, like
just a bigger gap between Voyager and Enterprise. Yeah.
Well,
or in terms of modern TV.
Yeah, in terms of modern TV, it's a shame it wasn't like 5 or 6 years later, where maybe we're in the Breaking Bad, Mad Men era.
Yeah.
And they could take some chances. You know, get a Bryan Cranston type to be the. Well, I mean, I guess Scott Bakula is basically a Bryan Cranston type.
Yeah.
To be the captain and just kind of.
Just and re-energize the series
at 10 p.m. on AMC and
have some Vulcan tits all over the place.
Yeah, I know. I'm just describing Discovery. I realize that now. But you know, the point is like it's strange that they jettison these good ideas so quickly just to go back to the status quo.
Yeah,
I need to talk to Sean's wife, Katana, because I mentioned we were covering Voyager, and she said, I love Voyager.
Yeah, Sean does too, though, right? Like,
I don't know what level he loves Voyager at. Like, from
he doesn't say he doesn't stress the loves when he says it. He's just
she definitely stressed the love, and I'm curious to ask her about it because I don't know if. I mean, I don't want to dismiss anybody's opinion or anything, but I was curious if maybe that was the first one she ever watched.
It's got to be. I was just going to say, it's like if I would predict one thing, it's the first Star Trek she watched.
Yeah, I'm curious. Next time I talk to her, I'll ask and see if I can get an answer.
Yeah.
And what her thoughts are about it.
Yeah, that would be the assumption. And also,
there's nothing wrong with that. If you love Voyager, great.
No,
I'm happy for you.
That's kind of the Hanlon argument, though. And what we talked about this too. Like, if we watched Voyager first, would we be where we are with it?
Yeah,
you know, and probably not. You'd probably think that. Because it would kind of be like TOS. Like there's like a novelty to the situation that you're watching because you've never seen any of it before.
Yeah, I would like to hope I would have the presence of mind to watch this episode and still come away going, this ain't it, guys.
I would too. And so I think that's the thing that makes it very strange. But did you... I wasn't... I said before, I just saw the way that I saw this episode was like the stuff that after I got over the initial boredom of Keston, I was like, oh, they're actually going to do something with it. You just see them go, you just see their like balls shrivel up and they're like, we can't do it. We just can't do this. We can't go this way with this episode.
They always get so close to being interesting. And
they do.
That's
the Voyager.
Eject in the last second. And it's so frustrating.
That's the Voyager trick so far, I think, is to do that. And I got to the end of this one and I thought that I started noticing all the characters were tertiary and stupid. I got really kind of annoyed by the fact I was like, this maybe is the worst in a franchise that has to do one episode romances. This Cass and Zahir thing was one of the worst that I've seen, I think. Yeah. Like, I don't understand what the attraction is there. Also, there's a kind of tangential thing. And this ties into...
Do they have sex?
They kiss. That's the implication, right? That they have sex.
Well, she's been out since 3 a.m., right? So
yes, right. Yeah. What else are you doing?
Yeah.
Not
watching Voyager.
Not reading the good book, I don't think. Anything like that.
Translating rock lights. So
I have a couple questions for you. How do you feel about let me remind me to say Kess's age. Just I'll do the other one first, but remind me if I forget. Kess's age. The Borg. Why? This ties into my criticism of the Borg in the previous episode that I said that we were going to get to later on. And I didn't realize the next episode would actually give me an end to this. Why does the show not want to have the conversation that Tuvok and the guy have about this dangerous area they're going into be about the Borg, and is instead some sort of nonsense empire that we've never heard of.
Yeah.
What are they doing with the Borg? Why introduce them this way? Why have the Delta Quadrant be what seems like it's the Wild West and has almost been like crippled by the Borg? Like there's no development in the Delta Quadrant that we've seen.
Right.
Why are they so scared to bring them in now and like develop this as you're approaching this bad space thing, and to build the Borg in a way that they are actually terrifying and something that we're scared to be running into? I just thought it was weird. You just ran into the Borg last episode. Just have them mention it offhand in this episode. Just like you're going near them.
It is kind of bonkers that the Borg's whole thing, like the way that Q introduces us to the Borg, is by saying they are this single-minded collective that all they do is consume and assimilate, and they will absolutely destroy your entire quadrant if they make it to the Alpha Quadrant. It's like, holy shit, we've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah.
And then we finally get to the Delta Quadrant, and the result of that seems to be everyone's kind of fine. They all wear big jackets now, you know?
Yeah, they're slightly more primitive, but the show itself hasn't even acknowledged that that's a Borg impact on everything.
Right. Yeah, like it's kind of wild to me that I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea that it took 3 seasons to introduce them on screen.
Yeah, agreed. It's a big space.
But, yeah. But like, if the Delta Quadrant is where the Borg are from, theoretically, they've probably sucked those bones dry, you know?
Yeah.
And so what does a post-Borg quadrant look like? And you could always keep that in the background. I mean, even if you don't address it and be like, man, have like someone like some dumbass like Harry Kim be like, what is going on here?
Right.
Why? What could have possibly caused all of this? And then Janeway being like, I know what fucking caused this.
Ensign.
Like have it be this sort of looming presence. It's bonkers to me that they went to the Delta Quadrant and just forgot about the Borg until now. And yeah, kind of to your point, instead of building off of what they did last episode and be like, yeah, you're going into this space that is notoriously Borg heavy or something.
Yeah, or not even mention them by name. Just like they're the ones. It's like people in this quadrant don't go into that area. It's like nothing good happens there.
Well, you can't, because you have to establish that the Piscine Raiders or whatever bullshit they come up with are out there and might get you.
Yeah, they
might get you.
Yeah.
Space pirates always out there somewhere.
But it's good because it allows me to bring.
Why is there so many space pirates? What's wrong with the economy of the quadrant? What possibly could have caused this?
It's been Borgified, and I'm happy because it allows me to bring up the point. My thought in Unity about what they did with the Borg was, I thought a bad decision at that point to introduce a crippled Borg ship. Right, like imagine if we were building towards. In a way that they built towards meeting the Dominion and Deep Space Nine, they name drop them a couple times.
Sure.
But we know what the Borg are. The first time that Voyager the Voyager runs into a cube, I think it would have been so much more impactful if it was a functional cube, right? Like if it was actually working. I don't know. I mean, maybe a Unity episode can come later or something, but I just think that they did a poor job knowing that they were going in this direction of getting to a Borg story, of really laying track and being like, there is something bad coming at the end of this season.
Well, I'm going to disagree with that, because I do like that they come across a non-functioning Borg cube. Because it kind of feels to me, because obviously the Borg are coming back, right? 7 of 9 showing up at some point, either the end of the season or early next season.
Yeah.
And so they're definitely coming back. So I'm assuming that they know this, that they know that they're coming back. So I kind of I like the idea of them running across a non-operational Borg cube in the same way as like in Alien, they find the husk of the big ship.
Yep.
Before they encounter that, you know what I mean? That kind of thing where it's like, oh, it's a harbinger of what is out there. The thing is, though, that doesn't do you any good if you don't follow that up with bits like we're talking about, where it's like, yeah, we can't go over there because of the Borg. having the Borg cube there as something, as a big reminder of what's going on, and a big red flag about what's coming down the pike. I actually really like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in order for that to really work, you need to. I think in that episode itself, you need to do things differently, like we talked about last episode, and I think you need to keep that at the top of your note card board, being like, this is always out there. How can we seed what's coming?
Yeah. I guess the alien analogy would for me, the problem with the alien analogy is that in Alien they don't know what the ship is.
Sure, yeah, it's not a 1-to-1, but it's the same kind of idea where you're seeing the results of something, or the it's foreboding enough to give you a sense of what's coming down the pike, even whether or not you know what that is.
Yeah, I guess from my point of view, if I was doing this, I would want the first appearance of a cube in Voyager to be something that we've been building for, and I want it to be as impactful as when TNG, when they see the cube for the first time and they just dramatically zoom in on it again as it's coming towards them and the music plays. That's a good moment, I think, and I think that the problem with the Unity idea was that they found it and were immediately like, well, let's just go on board and see what's going on over there, Yes. And I think that's, you have to do that when you find a unpowered Borg cube, where I would much rather Voyager be red alert all the time and eventually a cube shows up,
Well, so I would go the other way, just because I feel like if you come out of that episode where you run afoul of the shutdown cube, and you get into a situation, again, the ending of that episode, they fucking they punt, as they always seem to do. But if you had a satisfying ending to that episode, where for whatever reason the thing comes back on, however you want to do it, Voyager barely gets out of there, and then you just have someone say like, that was a cube that wasn't even working. What's going to happen when we finally run into one that's at full power?
Yeah.
And so that gives you this looming thing where it's like, shit, yeah, if this one's here, that means there's other ones. So what is going to happen when they finally run into one that's at full power?
That's fair. I think we're mostly aligned just about, I think we have different visuals in our head about like what we would want to see on it. But I agree generally with the point. Kess's age, I've remembered on my own. Kess is 2. And not that I disagree enough that I would ever push back, but there's always a conversation about like, and I think we've even mentioned it before, like her age becomes a problem because Neelix was dating like a 2-year-old, Yeah.
And it's a problem the same way that it's a problem that Angel is dating Buffy, who's 17, and he's like 250 years old.
Yeah. I think that
it's these numbers. It's like, it's an issue. Being very literal, but it's like in the world of the show, it's like, all right.
Well, I mean, for the Ocampo one, I would actually say that the Buffy one is worse because it's like it's a human thing where Kess is an alien that she's basically lived 1/5 of her life, right? So if you were to extrapolate it, she's not really 2. If you base it on a human, she'd be more like she's 20. At this point. And
yeah, well, I mean, like, would you apply that same mathematics to a child who dies when they're 9?
in terms of that they've lived their whole life, you mean?
Yeah, it's like but as far as Ocampo is concerned, they made it all the way through.
No, but Kess never talks like a 2-year-old. She never talks like a child. She's always portrayed as an adult female.
Yeah,
and
it's more honestly, it's like a dog. It's more like a dog.
You mean dog years that don't mean?
Yes.
Yeah, dog years don't mean anything. I guess my point is
a 12-year-old dog is like a 80-year-old person.
Yes.
That kind of equivalent.
Correct. That's my point about Kess, is that she might be a perfectly normal age for Neelix. It's like they've artificially screwed things up by saying that she's only going to live for so long. And so I never found it creepy that was the case. But I thought it got me wondering about like, again, it just brings me back to the point of if you had thought out Kess's arc a little bit better, she should have probably been more childlike in the early seasons, and developed a little bit more.
I think
naive.
You gotta walk. Yeah, I think you got to walk a really fine line there, though,
because Neelix is dating her. Yeah,
and if she's quote unquote 2 years old and she's acting like a child, then it's like, well, this gets creepy really fast. But I do understand what you're saying, and I think what they're doing here is the right amount. Well, they probably could be doing more, but I think they're approaching it the right kind of way, where she isn't like developmentally too young or too naive or anything like that, but she is aware of her own lifespan the way that someone who would be 20 years old is aware of their lifespan and the point they are in their life. I think I actually like the way that they handle it, but I do agree. I think there's room to wiggle there, where you can make her a bit more representational of what this Ocampan lifespan looks like, without getting really weird with it or creepy.
Because I think the better stories will come from that. It's just this coming of age story for Cass, and then a middle age story, and et cetera, and you can different writers of different ages will have different opinions about it.
Because if you look at it, it's like, I don't know how long she was with
Neelix.
Let's say she was with Neelix for a year, right? Yeah. So that he's basically the equivalent of like a high school boyfriend.
Correct. Right. That's the way I think of it. Yeah.
High school boyfriend who's like 45.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, they Ethan Phillips.
It is the same equivalent. It's the same as if 17-year-old Buffy Summers dating 200-year-old Angelus.
I only have one additional point. I think I did. Voyager, just like Enterprise, will occasionally do things that creep me out, and the malfunctioning holodeck characters creeped me out a little bit. I thought that was pretty effective.
Yeah, that was pretty. The one that got me was Hollow Socrates.
Is he the one on the ground?
Yeah, top like a action figure that had been pulled apart.
Yeah, that was cut in half with a lightsaber or something.
Yeah. And I did like the Doctor standing over the glitching out body of Lord Byron, basically like poking him with sensors and stuff.
In the original script, I think they were saying in that scene, the Doctor would have been poking around in holographic versions of Kess that he created, and she would come in and he would say, "I'm just getting to know you better," or something.
Oh, I love that, but that's fucking creepy as hell. Like you can't come back from that.
See, I guess, it's a good point.
Unless you did like a Superman 3 thing where you physically split the two apart so you can make it very clear.
Throw one into the fire. Yeah.
Yeah, that the Doctor was not the one who was doing this.
Do you think that they didn't have enough runway with the fact that he's a holographic program? I thought that's the reason they could get away with it, is because they can always just say he malfunctioned, and it's like they have this escape hatch where it's like he's not really the Doctor, it's just you got an insight that they could end up like the Doctor would never act this way, but it's something that is clearly in him, that kind of a thing.
I think something like that is too far, because at that point it's like, okay, if that's a malfunction, I don't think I can ever trust this thing ever again. You know what I mean?
We've had that about Data too. It's like when Data goes rogue, how often are you going to trust him or continue to trust him?
Yeah, exactly.
Any other thoughts about this one, or should we go with the patron thoughts?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, so that's it. We'll go to patron thoughts. Everyone who wants to support the show can go to patreon.com/the Pensky File. You leave a couple dollars. You can leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes, and we read them on the podcast. There's only 13 Darkling comments, which is very low, and I was surprised that that's all that there are going to be. But if you want to support the show, Patreon, leave your comments. We'll read them on the podcast. We'll start with numero uno here, 1 out of 13, Kyle Barrett. And let me actually get into your little Discord chat bubble room. There it is. I'll let you read Kyle's first, I guess. Here, I'll copy this. I'll send it over to you. This is Kyle Barrett with Darkling.
Darkling. I was totally expecting the story about a creature so massive it generates its own gravitational field to be the start of a Yo Mama joke.
Mm-hmm. Or Star Wars ripoff, I think.
The first 10 minutes of this one have potential, but the rest is nonsense. The episode should be about the Doctor's jealous dark side appearing, but they play that as a twist at the end and instead his evil deeds are lamely excused because he created a dastardly Byron Gandhi cocktail, which has no thematic relevance whatsoever and is just plain dumb. Kes grew up stuck in underground caves being molested by Neelix and only has a few years to live, so her wanting to become a hedonistic explorer makes perfect sense, but no, this isn't the episode she leaves the show. If she has to leave Voyager, then this is a good way to do it, but as for the way she actually does, well, they'll burn that bridge when they get to it. 2 pieces of scenery stuck in Robert Picardo's teeth out of 5. Yeah, I think just overall, much like everything else in the show, the idea of the Ocampan thing is good.
Yep.
It's an interesting idea, but they just do nothing with it. Because Kyle's right. Like these these people should be like fucking daredevils or something. You know, like swashbuckling adventurers. Yep. They've got 10 years to live, and they're gonna make the most out of it.
Yeah, they should basically it's just a coked up version of a real life experience. You know, like it's dealing with a teenage situation, except more egregious because they go through it so quickly, and it's just kind of almost like a schizophrenic outlook, and that would be really interesting.
You got to think that built into their society is the fact that they're just fucking all the time.
Yes, right.
Because if they die when they're 10, like you really got like a limited window to procreate.
Yep.
And that even on top of that, you'd think that, okay, well, if you die when you're 10 and you're ready to go at 2 or whatever, or whatever it is, then you're gonna,
No, you got like lemmings. You got to have large litters. Just so you can all plummet off the cliff and into the sea. Tax Owlbear says, Darkling, they probably didn't do this on purpose, but if you don't want to generate an evil twin, maybe don't install yourself with the personalities of 4 historical figures, of which 3 have by modern standards highly questionable views on sexuality, and the 4th one, T'Pau, is fictional. I need to know what Gandhi's sexual proclivities are. I didn't know any of this. Anyway, also, Cass realizing that she is going to die soon and should probably have some fun would have been the more interesting thing to focus on. Concito says, Darkling, well, this is a rarity, a Doctor episode that whiffs, 1 out of 5. Patrick Seba says, I'll read the verse. I'll spare you this. My first verse discarded over Berman's glare. Yes, cold open incels just beg for his flare. But we'd be remiss to never ask this. Who at Lego designed Dear Kess's hair? One of Gandhi's holographic underage roommates out of 5. Oh, was he into children or something? Is that Gandhi's?
Oh, was he? Oh,
maybe. That's just going off that comment. That might be. You can't judge people. You can't go in with your Western standards about who you're allowed to have sex with. This is Norman Buckwald with Darkling.
Darkling, even Robert Picardo's acting could not rescue this mess of a script. It seems Kes is going through, quote, adolescence without still trying to make it clear to the audience she and Neelix broke up while Mr. Hyde does his evil. This episode has been called by fans as the first in the trilogy of terror, although the second one is not that bad. One howling prop out of 5. I'm really curious to know what the other 2 are.
Yeah, we'll get to. Although we went through a trilogy of terror in Enterprise that was 3 ones in a row, and I think that was worse than this episode was. But we'll see when we get to the end of it. Darkling. Jaron Hatch says, the producers decide to give Kes a sexy catsuit, and in its very first episode, her mentor gets rapey. Classic Voyager. No wonder for Jennifer Lien, I guess, I don't know how you pronounce her last name, went batshit crazy after getting kicked off of this show. 2 bobblehead Gandhis out of 5.
I did notice the jumpsuit. Is this the first time she wears that?
Again, this goes down to me not noticing any of this stuff. I didn't even realize it was different from her normal outfit.
I did notice that, like, I couldn't tell if the scene where she's been up all night, it looked like her suit was fitting very poorly, and I couldn't tell if that was just good character work on the visual character work, or if it just was like they hadn't figured out how to make this outfit work yet.
This is Matt Ross with Darkling. I just sent it to
Darkling. The Doctor really needs some limits on his freedom. I do like how the evil Doctor's hair and demeanor change.
I noticed the hair. That's what I did notice.
And he even looks unshaved. The aliens, whatever. I think watching Gandhi's head roll in a circle is one of the better weirdnesses of the episode. Picard and Leanne, fun to watch, and that's the only reason it gets a 3 out of 5 from me.
You still there?
I'm still here.
Oh, sorry. It just chopped out at the very end. I clicked and it like chopped and it made me very concerned that I chopped the wrong button. Changeling says, Darkling, so are we just going to ignore the fact that the doctor tried to kill someone? I don't know about you, but when I intentionally alter my mental states and commit assault, I go to jail. I'm at odds with the episode. It took me 3 tries to finish it because the first half was so boring, but I really liked the doctor going Mr. Hyde, or I guess in this case just Mr. in the second half. 1.5 headbanging Gandhis out of 5.
Do you think it's enough at the end that he recites the Hippocratic Oath to reset him back to...
No, it's not appropriate to denigrate the oath. Boy, this episode could, like when he's got Balan on the like tied down and he's like stroking the inside of her thigh and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, this Star Trek episode is going to go places. Excellent choice of B'Elanna as the person in that situation. I thought she's very capable of like fighting back against him, and it doesn't come across as extremely awful. Interestingly, I thought Dawson did a really good job of playing that in such a way that it doesn't come across as like a exploitation film or anything.
Yeah, much like the last episode. Is it the last one or the one before that? Anyway, she no, it's the one the
blood fever. Yeah.
She gives him a lot of rope.
She does.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I kept thinking when he was down with Kes in the bar there, all I kept thinking was like, Kes, just grab the fucking hologram thing off his arm.
Just smash it.
Although he was fucking with it and like, well, you'll die if you move. Whatever.
Another good idea. A hologram holding someone in fire. That's a good idea. You know?
Oh yeah.
That's a good attack plan from a hologram. I don't understand why he did that to that guy or what relevance it had to the plot at all, but
he needed a ship.
We'll get where we go.
Get a ship.
Point Extra G says, Darkling, this episode gives us Bob Picardo running around and being insane. Does it even matter what the plot is? I'll send you this last one, I think. There's a couple more, but this will be your last one. The rest are short. This is Groppler John Zorn.
Sadly, this could have been an interesting episode if the writers knew anything about the historical figures they invoked. What if we used this sci-fi vehicle to actually investigate the psychology of a Gandhi or a Socrates to find their inadequacies in present-day dilemma? You really are not watching this show if that's what you're looking for.
It's a good idea.
It's an interesting notion that our inner pantheon of heroes might hold negative interactions that require our own humanity to justify. To translate that, they were all really racist.
that's the way the modern shows would go, yeah.
Instead, Picardo twirls his mustachio, and whoever Kes takes a liking to gets brutally hurled off a cliff. Shame on you, Kes. 1 out of 5. It's not Kes's fault. 1 out of 5.
I mentioned my ignorance before. I would need someone better than Gandhi, like Gandhi's proclivities or whatever, or Lord Byron. But I could easily see that being the case, and it would be something. There's something interesting there about some of the great ancient thinkers still believed in slavery and everything. They're all products of their time and stuff like that. But Voyager is not going to be the show that does that, I suppose.
Every single one of them would go, a woman captain, huh?
Slaps her on the ass. Artoria says, Darkling, it reminds me of the psychological concept of the shadow and virtue. Is a rabbit virtuous because it does no harm? Well, you can call something that does not have the capacity for harm virtuous. Can you be virtuous and be a monster? Well, do you have the capacity for violence, and how do you act on it? When psychologists asked what's the difference between people who committed the Holocaust and us, the answer they found was very little. I guess perhaps we're all monsters, whether sleeping or awake, but you have the courage to choose to face the shadow, and if so, how do you incorporate that element into yourself and choose to act on it? Also, Picardo's acting is great. 3 dark threads out of 5.
I recently saw something. I don't remember what it was. I think it was like a clip from a movie or something.
Yep.
Where the big line was, it had something to do with animals. Like there was, and the big line was, well, have you ever seen an animal make a mistake? And that was like the big mic drop thing.
Yep.
And I thought about it for a second. I was like, that's kind of a clever line. But then I was like, I've seen a lot of dead animals on the road. I'm pretty sure I've seen animals that make mistakes.
My first instinct was a mouse running through a maze to get food will make a mistake. Like it just will go down the wrong pathway, you know.
I've seen my dog walk into a table enough times.
That's right. Animals, yeah, you'd see those videos of the bear that climbed the tree outside like the police station. They get shot with a dart and fall into the electrical wires. That bear made a mistake. Made a big mistake.
There's always those videos of like a lion, a really majestic looking lion that does a big yawn and just like loses its balance and slides down a hill.
That's right.
Right into the mouth of an alligator.
Yep. And plenty of adorable panda babies going down a slide on their asses and just falling off and rolling down.
That's the whole metaphor about lemmings is based around lemmings making mistakes.
There you go. Yeah. So
whatever this movie was,
it was terrible. It must have been
badly written.
It must have been that ghost Denzel Washington movie.
I will say, Denzel Washington could deliver that line very well. Have you ever seen an animal make a mistake? No, I mean, to hear it like that, no, I haven't. Great point.
There's a good comedian bit who does impersonations, and he does like Denzel. The bit is him. He goes in like a wings joint that he learns that Denzel Washington is the owner of. It's very, very funny. I would recommend people look that up. Look up Denzel Washington impression hot sauce. Royo says Darkling, a dud. Usually using historical figures can spice up an episode, but they do nothing with them except use them as props. The Mad Doctor would be put to better effect in future episodes. He comes back as Mad Doctor, 1.5 out of 5. And the final comment is Jonas, Darkling, so the newly single Kess has some bright red blush on for all the scenes except for the last one, and all the scenes, that is, where she was courting the new alien. I guess she got plane back on the ship where there was no hunk in sight. The dialogue between Byron and Gandhi was unsubtle. This was a fun episode to watch, but not a very good one. Hey, no Neelix, 3 out of 5. We can't end every Voyager episode with Hey, no Neelix, 3 out of 5, but we're trying to. So I think the patrons probably there's a couple 1s and a couple 3s. I'm going to say they ended up at a 2 average. So what are you going to say, Clay, on a scale of 1 to 5? What do you rate this episode?
Well, I tend to give points for episodes that aren't great but have interesting ideas in them.
Yeah.
But I am going to deduct points for having interesting ideas that were just completely wasted.
Sure.
I think I'm going to give this a 1.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give it a 2.
I was thinking about a 2, but I've given a lot of 2s,
and
this is worse than those episodes, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I can't argue. I'm stuck in I still think that it was interesting on some level. Like the failure, I guess, is still kind of interesting.
Yeah.
If they had gone with that sexual predator monster thing, like it would be like, wow, what a ballsy Voyager this is. But no, it didn't.
I think that's the thing for me is like it has these things on the table, but it is so afraid to do anything with them.
Yeah.
And then to just cap it all off, that ending where it's like, yeah, none of this matters. Everything's going back to 1, and everything you just watched just doesn't have there's no point to any of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't disagree with you on. I'll give it a 2 to average it out a little bit. I feel like don't have the list, but I feel like there are worse ones that we've seen this season, so I'll give it a 2 just to bump up our average a little bit. But I can't disagree with giving it a 1. I thought it was a pretty bad episode. Although again, we're entering the trilogy of terror, and I didn't know if I thought it was that bad, but maybe we'll see.
This like 3 in a row? Is the trilogy of terror?
I think it is. It's just supposed to be 3 badly reviewed episodes in a row. So
gotcha.
The next ones are because I'm on the page, I can see them. So it's Rise and then Favorite Son. Both of those sound like Enterprise episodes.
Yeah, they do.
I feel like Fortunate Son was an Enterprise episode, I think. Anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks patrons.
It ain't me.
It ain't me. What is a rummage sale? Is that a yard sale?
I think so.
Okay. Thanks everybody for supporting the show on Patreon. I always wonder. Patreon.com/The Pensky File. You can leave your comments, support the show. All the other shows on the little podcast network get supported from the Patreon. So you can go there, do that. Thank you very much. There's a Discord. You can also join that. Leave your thoughts on the Discord about this episode when it comes out. Leave your thoughts on the YouTube video. That's it. Thanks, everybody. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, check out Rotten Horror Picture Show on Patreon. Amanda and I are doing video nasties this year, And we're this month in August, we're doing Toby Hooper's The Funhouse. We just did Sleepaway Camp on the main feed because we realized we'd done a bunch of summer camp horror movies, but they were all Patreon episodes.
Yep.
So we brought some summer camp to the main feed. And the next episode we're going to be doing is The Exorcist in honor of William Friedkin's passing this past week. So that should be fun. Man, if you've ever listened to our show, you know that there is a big discrepancy as far as where these movies are placed on this list that we work off of, which is the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list.
Yeah, just that you find the algorithm inscrutable, basically.
Yes, yeah. And we might have a new champion as far as worst positioning on the list, which is our previous barometer had been the Shining, which started off in like at 117 or something, and then eventually moved up to like 100 or somewhere in there. The which is still criminally high,
very high,
list, or low, depending on how you want to look at it. The Exorcist is number 126.
Oh wow!
On this list, which is The Exorcist being a movie that many people consider to be the scariest movie of all time, and might be the only movie. No, I guess the Silence of the Lambs. I was going to say it might be the only movie on the list that has won an Oscar. One of only a couple.
What year did Exorcist come out?
70. I want to say 73.
It came out. The first one is 73.
73, yeah.
Because that Rotten Tomatoes ranking basically functions like war. So was 1973 a very good year for horror?
In retrospect, it was. Yeah, I think 73 is.
It has Westworld, Wicker Man, Nothing But the Night, The Exorcist, Don't Look Now.
Yep.
I think it ran into that's what's killing it in that rating system.
But like The Exorcist is
the best of those.
Yeah, like all of those other movies that you just listed off with this, most people don't know.
Sure.
You know, like The Wicker Man and what was the last one you said? Don't Look Now.
Yeah,
those are great movies, but those are fairly niche. The Exorcist is like has 100% name brand recognition.
No, I agree. Yeah, that rating system is bizarre, but that would be my guess as to why it's so low there, because it's 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It must be, right?
Yeah, I haven't looked, but
it probably is. Yeah, but I mean, Sleepaway Camp was like 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. That doesn't make any fucking sense.
It wasn't on the list, but we did a wild card for that one. But yeah, it was an 80%.
It doesn't even make sense being 80% on critics. That's ridiculous.
As I say on the show, I feel like it must be all modern reviews that are taking a more revisionist look at it.
Yeah.
With the internet infamy baked into it, because like, come on, guys. It's an interesting movie. It's not an 80% movie.
Well, was that? Did I hear? Wasn't the audience rating lower on Rotten Tomatoes for that movie?
It was a 60.
That doesn't make any sense. It should be the other way around. Like, not that the number should be inverted, but the audience score should definitely be higher on that stuff. That's one of my bugaboo, or my I don't think that's the right expression, but my bugbears or whatever is the
pet peeve.
Yeah, a little pet peeve is that I find, the people say you have to ignore the critic rating because there's always like this anti-critic sentiment out there, and they go, you have to watch the audience rating. I find the audience rating is a much less reliable number than the critic rating. Like, I can disagree with the critic rating, but the audience rating is clearly an internet affected. Like, it can swing based on just if someone has a Reddit thread that gets successful,
definitely.
So it's like, the audience score is just meaningless to me on Rotten Tomatoes, but not that the critic score is obviously perfect.
We watched a movie the other night. Amanda and her husband and a couple of our friends were going to How Did This Get Made? And so we all watched the movie they were covering, which it was on Amazon Prime, and I think the rating on Amazon Prime, it had like the Rotten Tomatoes score for the movie, and the Rotten Tomatoes score was like 15% or something like that.
Yeah.
And it also had the Amazon star rating, and it was 4.5 stars.
Yes.
From like over 1,000 people. And it's like, oh, right.
If you are at 4 stars on Amazon, your product sucks, basically.
Yeah.
It's a very fine scale, but you have to pay attention to the gradients. Thanks everybody for listening. Darkling is the episode we just covered. I think I said we're doing Rise next, so we'll be back with Rise. Thank you very much for listening and supporting the show. We will see you later.